Come on.
Recording is on.
There we go. Scroll up. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual discussion of here with us today. As a reminder, you can purchase this book in the store if you can get a hold of a copy. We still have some stuff. We've sold out about twice now, which is pretty cool. So let's see. Merritt grew up in the segregated South in the 1950s and 60s. He experienced the Jim Crow laws, the colored drinking fountains, the segregated schools with hand-me-down books for the Black schools, riding in the back of the bus. Merritt moved to Olympia in 1974 with his wife, Marcia Tadano Long. Their daughter, Marissa, was born at St. Peter Hospital. I was too, oh my gosh. And she attended McLean Elementary, Jefferson Middle School, and Capitol High School. Merritt and Marcia started the Learning Seed Foundation in 2001, which is a component fund of the Community Foundation of South Puget Sound and has awarded $447,750 in new and renewable scholarships to 109 students from Thurston and Pierce counties. If you ask book people to do math, we take a second to read off numbers. So during this event, we advise to press the tile view button at the bottom of your screen to see Merritt full screen, if you haven't already. After that, Merritt and I will have a discussion, and then we will open it up to the audience. As you heard, we plan to record this event. So if you don't want to appear on video, please keep your cameras disabled. You can do this at the bottom of your screen. Also, if you haven't already, please make sure to enter your name. Please keep your mics muted for most of the time. When it does come time for questions, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you to unmute yourself and ask Merritt your questions. Also, I found that most people just like asking the author questions in the chat, which is also pretty great. And then I will go through those. So, Merritt, I give the floor to you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Joan. First of all, I want to thank you and Orca Books for making this evening possible. Very much appreciated. And we also appreciate the fact that our book is done extremely well at your bookstore and here in town. And you really made my day when we read that it had been a smash. So we want to keep smashing. But of course, we also have books that, with all due respect to Browser Books, support our local businesses here in town. And then, Marcia, there's a store in Chehalis, Book and Brush, that also are carrying the book. Thank you, John. I'll do the same. We can mirror up here on the opposite ends of the screen. Yeah, oh, yeah, okay. There's a couple of things I want to do before getting started. One is to acknowledge a couple of people. One is my wife, Marcia Tadano Long. This is indeed my memoir, but it's indeed our book. Marcia was just so instrumental in getting me across the finish line. It seemed as though I was always wanting to do one more thing, one more topic. And then I got to the point where it was just wearing me out. And then the other person, so Marcia, I wouldn't be here tonight discussing this book if it wasn't for Marcia. And the other person who played a very critical role is a longtime friend and colleague, Barbara Glass. Barb, thank you so much. I remember the first time I said to Barb, I have a couple more things. And she nodded her head. And then the next time I said, Barb, I have a couple of more things. And she nodded her head. And then the third time I said that, she said, Merritt, you'll be saying that until the very, very end. So just keep writing. And when you're done, okay? But Barb was very much involved in the editing and the sequencing and just put her heart and soul in the project. So I was am a very lucky guy to have Barb and Marshall work very closely with me, and the fruition of the book, My View from the Back of the Bus. So what I want to do, Joan, if it's okay with you, is to, give a little sense of the origin of the book. Why did I write the book? And then secondly, I want to share a vignette from the book, and then open it up for questions, Jonah, that you may have and the folks on the chat may have. And then if time permits, I'd like to do another vignette and do something similar, and then end with any closing comments, etc. If that seems reasonable. Okay, I got 2 thumbs up, Marcia, so I think I'm going to go with that. The first something is, about 15 years ago, I was 25. No. I had a rough life. You can tell I look pretty old, but anyway, at that particular time, I was working at the state lottery as the lottery director under Governor Gary Locke. Marsha and I both served in his cabinet. Marsha was the director of general administration. And I had been invited by the State Liquor Control Board to make a presentation during Black History Month. So I thought about what should I discuss, who should I write about, and several things came to mind. I thought about one of our local heroes and founders, George Bush. I thought about the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and of course, the tremendous role that he's played in human rights, civil rights. And then thirdly, I thought about Dr. Charles Drew with his discovery and use of plasma. And then for some reason, I just started reflecting on my childhood and my days of growing up in the segregated South. And what came to mind was my first bus ride and that particular experience. So as opposed to, say, going and doing research and footnotes and all kind of stuff, I realized that I was the living, walking history. So what I wanted to do then and now is to share with you, through my eyes, a firsthand account of growing up in the segregated South during the iconic Jim Crow eras of the 50s and 60s and all that came with that. Now I will get into and read my first bus ride. I'm sorry. My first bus ride was the impetus for the book, and that was the reason that I got started with the book. And by my saying that, you may figure out that tonight is the first night that I'm deviating from not doing my first bus ride. Now, if there's popular demand, I will do it. But Marsha and I thought I'd come at this a little bit differently tonight. And based on old habits, I almost went down that road, but we're going to go a different way. So I took you left. Now I'm going to take you right. So here we go. Guess who came after dinner? Mom, Dad, Brother Ken, and I were relaxing in our living room one fall evening at 2317 Exeter Avenue, watching the Ed Sullivan Show. This Sunday night ritual was one of the few occasions other than dinner when we were all together. It was 1961, and I was a sophomore at Jackson S. Abrams High School. Earlier that day, immediately following church, we had feasted on one of my mom's special Sunday suppers. She routinely prepared Sunday dinners the day before. That way, she relaxed on Sunday because all she needed to do was warm the various dishes. Once in a while, my father would cook during the week, but Sunday dinner was hers alone. It was a big deal, and we looked forward to this treat. My mom actually prepared 2 meals on Saturday, one for my father, who was extremely picky about his food, which meant my mom tailored one meal specifically to him. My father had his own small table in the kitchen where he ate all his meals. My mother, Brother Ken, and I would eat together around the dining room table, enjoying the second meal she prepared to satisfy the limited palates of her 2 sons. I know exactly what you're thinking, how spoiled and pampered the men of the Long household were. And you are absolutely correct. And we enjoyed every morsel and minute of it. This particular Sunday, Mom had prepared one of my favorite pots. It consisted of green beans with chopped white onions, green onions, and chunks of white potatoes that had simmered around ham hocks for a couple of hours. I have relived eating this amazing dish many times, and when doing so, the saliva in my mouth starts to get in the ready position. I have imagined a little grease from the ham hocks gently burning my lips. Not too much, but just enough to get my attention. During previous meals, the grease from the fixing would speak to me, saying, calm down, slow down. The food is not going anywhere. Act as though you've had this before, which you have. Each and every time you have this dish, the grease said, I have to remind you to slow your roll. Of course, there were extra onions available if you wanted to add them, and small green peppers on a little plate looking up at you saying, I bet you won't try me, but beware, I'm too hot to handle. Mom had prepared T-bone steaks in such a way that I have never experienced anything close to them since. Actually, I'm not preparation and execution of this dish. Execution is indeed the right word because she literally killed it. With the exception of baking certain pies and cakes, I never saw my mom use a recipe. Her recipes, I'm sure, came from her mother and the lessons learned from trial and error. Here we go. On that Saturday, Mom began by seasoning to her taste at least 3 T-bone steaks. This seasoning consisted of black pepper, salt, celery, and garlic salt, and a splash or 2 of Worcestershire sauce. Then she let the meat marinate for 4 to 5 hours. I knew the magic was about to happen when I heard her tear the aluminum foil to cover the pan of steaks before placing them in the oven at 275 degrees. I don't know how long the steaks would originally cook on Saturday, but on Sunday, she would put those bad boys back in the oven until she felt they were ready to serve. The meat was like butter, cooked past well done, but still juicy, flavorful, and cocoa brown in its sauce. Once the dishes were served up, the real dance began. The juices from the ham hocks, beans, and potatoes would slowly wind their way to intersect with the steak. What a wonderful and glorious collision. I momentarily stopped eating as suggested to me earlier and wisely by the pot grease, just to savor the moment. Nirvana is rapidly approaching. Remember, act as though you've had this before. My mom was not big on saying I love you. She showed and gave her love to you by doing things with you and for you. That could be cooking, baking, making sure you knew how to properly use a knife and fork, and instilling a sense of pride and confidence that you were special when everything around you said differently, and pushing you to be stronger when you became discouraged. As we were relaxing after mom's wonderful dinner and thinking about dessert, we didn't know, but we were about to have unexpected guests. My family evening of TV watching changed dramatically when out of nowhere came the sound of horns honking, not in a honk to let someone know you're there or a honk to say hello to a friend you haven't seen for a while. This honking was different. It was the sound of many cars honking, saying, come take a look at me. I'm coming down your street, and the reason I'm honking is for you to see and fear me. I got up from the sofa, walked over to the front door, and looked through one of the 3 small windows in the door to see what was going on. To my shock and amazement, I saw at least 10 cars, one behind the other. Horns blared, and the inside lights of all the cars were on, illuminating 2 people in the front seat and 2 people in the back seats. They wore what appeared to be white sheets with hoods. As I watched from a distance of about 20 feet, the hoods looked like an upside down V-shape or cone head, similar to the Conehead family on Saturday Night Live with Dan Aykroyd and Jane Curtin. This was no joke, though, and no one in our household laughed. Even though this caravan incident occurred over 60 years ago, the image of that experience is as sharp and clear as when it happened. However, I'm quick to remind myself that Klansmen driving through the neighborhood are not your usual Saturday night experience, pale in comparison to some of the horrific acts of brutality, lynching, and murdering of primarily Black men in the South as well as the North. For a moment, that seemed like an eternity. I was stuck at the small window, watching and not knowing what to do. Should we call the police? I don't think so. Policemen were probably a part of the Ku Klux Klan caravan. Should I run outside and let them know I wasn't afraid of their antics? No, not if I wanted to live, given the history of the Klan. I thought I'd let the Klan know I was watching them and turn the porch light on. As soon as I hit the switch, my brother Ken called out, "Turn that porch light off. Let's not bring attention to ourselves. Come back over here and sit down." Ken was right. I sat down, dazed that the Klan was making such a public display of their existence. After the Klan drove away, I wondered why our neighborhood and why that night. As a family, we never discussed this incident that night or in future days. At the same time, we didn't need to discuss it. Everyone knew what time it was. Time to remind the colored folks what their place was in the white world of Bessemer, Alabama. The colored and white water fountains with its specialized plumbing to provide colored water for coloreds and specially distilled white water for the whites wasn't that long ago. The Klan and other mass whites wanted to preserve the past and shape the future based on a racist past. Ken, who had worked in my place for 1 week that summer, said it was Bob Wright, my boss from the flower shop where I worked, and his homeboys coming by to let me know that I needed to step up my yes sirs and no ma'ams and tilt my head more downward when talking to them. They had come by to send me a message. In fact, Ken shared with me that Mr. Wright told him I needed to be more respectful of white people at the flower shop. Even though my behavior did not change when I returned to work, Mr. Wright never said anything to me. Maybe he had heard me flush the toilet in the forbidden whites only restroom on those occasions when I refused to walk the 3 blocks to the public colored restroom at the county courthouse. You know, Ken, I think you were right. That concludes that particular vignette, and back to you.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, that was. Can you see me on this new screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfectly.
Great. Things. Okay, so that was really powerful. So tell me, what kicked off the idea to write a memoir?
Okay. Well, what kicked off the idea was when I finished that first vignette, my first bus ride at the liquor board during Black History Month. And I realized that I had a story to tell, and that story of my growing up in the segregated South was something that our daughter, our son, and nieces and nephews and cousins really didn't know about or hadn't experienced firsthand. And it was like it hadn't happened in some ways. So I thought from a historical legacy point of view, it would be good to do. And then secondly, I thought as an homage to my mom and dad because of their sacrifices and sending my brother and I to college with limited resources. When I finished college, I had no student loans, no debt. They financed the whole deal. And the same thing basically with my brother. Marsha's parents, very similar. I think she did work occasionally while in school and had some loans, but they were paid off by the time she exited college. But as I thought about it more, I realized, in fact, what I'm going to do is to share with you what Dolan Perkins Valdez said about the book. Merritt Long Tales belongs to all of us. This is not just a personal memoir. This is a history of a country. It gripped me from the first word to the last, engrossing, poignant, and ultimately triumphant. Dolan Perkins Valdez, author of The Bomb and the New York bestseller, Winch. So, in summary, after writing the initial vignette and thinking about other stories that were literally seared in my memory, I decided that I wanted to go on this journey of putting a book together. And with the help of a number of people, Denny Heck had recently completed a book. Our lieutenant governor now, and I sat with him 15 plus years ago and got his advice, and a number of folks as well. But that's the origin.
I was wondering, why do you call them vignettes and not chapters or essays? Can you?
Well, I like the sound of vignettes. So chapters has a little more flair to it, you know.
It
does. Well, number one, that's true. But also, I see, and again, this is just how I've been raised and what's in my head. A chapter is being more elongated, and when there's a chapter, because as you may recall in the book, the vignettes range anywhere from a page to 20 pages or 30 pages. And it's not something that has to be necessarily read sequentially, because each vignette, each story is self-contained. So that's how I started writing about it. And then when I took a writing class, maybe 10 years into the process, the instructor used the word vignette, and we had been talking about vignettes anyway, so it just stuck.
So did you, you said you took a writing class 10 years into writing this book?
Yeah.
My God. I mean, you're already such a great writer. Like what was that process like?
Well, you know, I think about Marcia, my wife. She is very good technically at figuring things out and reading the directions and following the process. And if I'm doing something, I'm into it halfway, and she'll say, Merritt, have you read the directions yet? No. So, okay. So after writing for a decade, I said, you know, at Marcia's suggestion, it might not be a bad idea to learn some of the tricks of the trade. But it was very serendipitous how it came about. It was a class at Tumwater Lacey Senior Center, actually the Virgil Clarkson, the former mayor of Lacey's Senior Center. It was a small class, about 10, 12 people. And we would write stories, and we would get feedback on the stories. And the instructor would provide us examples of, you know, how to make things appear where you're not telling the story, but you're feeling it and you're seeing it. So it really gave me some tools in addition to the ones that I sort of naturally came by. And I've always been a storyteller in the sense of, I think stories are things that I remember when I'm at a conference or a training exercise. I tend to remember the messages behind the story more so than just reading the facts and figures. But let me just say one other something, and that is the journey with the 15 years went through periods where maybe 1 year I didn't do anything on the book. And really after taking that writing class, 5 years from that point, or give or take, I'm not being maybe 100% accurate here, but that's when I got serious about the book. And I was involved with I had been involved in more external work activities, and I just narrowed and focused more on the book and just made more of a commitment that I was going to do the book. I told more people that I was working on a book. So people see you and they'll say, well, how's that book coming there? Well, let's see. It's in the works, you know. So I would advise any want to be author, be sure you tell some folks that you're working on it if you want to complete it, because eventually you got to see those people and they're going to ask you what's happening with the book. So it's a way of holding yourself accountable by others holding you accountable.
You're 100% right.
You like that?
I like that. One thing, could you walk me through taking the writing class and then the process of through those 5-ish years from the writing class to getting the book on the shelf of bookstores? What was that like?
It was like a marathon. It was like an endurance test. It was torture. It was exhilarating. And I'll never forget, as I was maybe 2 years away from finishing the book, I didn't realize it at the time. And I was talking to Denny Heck about my progress. And Denny said, Merritt, are you to the point where you can't wait to get up in the morning to get started and you can just look forward to these different things that you learn about yourself? And I said, no, I haven't got to that point yet. But fortunately, as I get chill bumps telling the story, I did. And that was the magic. Because just to, and you can appreciate this, just to come up with the right word, or like in the story about my mother and her cooking and saying that she had executed the cooking of this meat and how she had just killed it. I mean, certain alliterations, I guess they'll call, that you do and pull together, it just makes you want to do more of that. The downside of that is, for me, is I'll write something and I'll go, that is so boring. I don't want to read that myself. Why would someone else want to read it, you know? But the other something, probably for me, on the upside is I had an opportunity to be where I am now, which is on the other side of the book, in that I can reflect on my experiences and realize the impact that those experiences had on me and my personality. My years of working at the flower shop, although there were certain negative factors. The first day on the job, I was told, you can't use that restroom. That's whites only. If you want to go to the restroom, you need to go around to the courthouse. Okay. It's like whatever came from my body was so bad that they didn't want it in the store. Okay. And realizing that, you know, I'm going to use that bathroom. If I'm going to feel good about myself as a person, I'm not going to go every day. Okay. Because sometimes it was nice to have a break to go to the courthouse, but I just wouldn't be restricted that way. And in terms of some familial family relationships, particularly with my father, I had a chance to work through some of those issues and realize that he wasn't as bad as I initially thought as a child, after reflecting on his life and what he went through and what he had to do to survive and what he did to support my brother and our family. So it gave me a better appreciation of my family. And then the one something I'd say is that it gave me better, it provided for, it enabled me to stop and to try to look through the lens or the eyes of the other person versus just being so focused on me.
One thing I'm wondering is, so this book is about growing up in the South. In what way do you think the world has improved since you grew up in the South? And what ways has it not improved?
Good question. Well, let's go back in time for a brief period of time. 1968, I'm 21 years old, just graduated from college, and I'm being interviewed for a position with a utility company in Birmingham. Again, 1968. And the interviewer asked me what was my major and what was my minor in college. And I told him I was a political science major. And he looked at me and he started laughing. And he said, "Mary, you probably want to be the mayor of Birmingham." And the reason he was laughing was that prior to 1969, every mayor in Birmingham from the beginning of time in Bestman, Birmingham, had been white, male or female, primarily white males. However, from 1969 till today, every mayor in Birmingham has been an African American, if I'm not mistaken. Mostly men. I think there have been a couple of women. So there's definitely progress in that respect. And in thinking about this, the other area that I would comment on is the political arena. There's a couple things here. One is what I call, and Marsha and I call the Obama effect. When President Obama or candidate Senator Obama was running for president, the networks hired more people of color to interview him, to be on the campaign trail. And as a result of the increase of African Americans covering the president has led to a number of those folks still being on TV. I think about Joy in the Morning, Joy Reid, and how she started out and what she's doing now. I think about Bakari Sellers and the work that he's doing, and the list goes on. And then if you reflect on the most recent election and think about when CNN reporters were interviewing officials in different states about the election results, the profile of the attorney generals or the secretary of states was seniors, senators and representatives. It was a mosaic of women, white women, Asian American, African American, Hispanic. You wouldn't have seen that 10 years ago. At the same thing happens at the local level, state, city, county. I think about when Ron Sims was the executive of King County, Norm Rice, the mayor of Seattle. At the same time, Gary Locke was the first Asian American elected governor in the state of Washington. And that says significant things about the voters and the people in Washington state, because unlike, say, Georgia or other states where you have a large African American community, you don't have the votes here to just drive a candidate home without having a coalition of people working together to get someone elected. So on that particular sense, I see a number of changes. And then, of course, most recently, we have the Vice President, Kamala Harris, of Asian and African American, who probably will run for president one day, okay? Which hopefully she'll break another ceiling. On the other side, and I'll stop here because I'm going on a bit, and that is, when I think about the sports arena, as an example, it reminds me of an institutional, I won't say slave mentality, because the players are compensated very, very, very well. However, compared to what the owners, the people who own the teams, the people who coach, the general managers, the coaches on the sidelines are mostly white. So the workers, Black folks could shut down football games if they boycotted it, because that's where most of the players are. The same thing in basketball. So in that particular arena, I think basketball has been a little more progressive than football. But when you think about the state of the ownership, who's in charge, the decision making, comparing that to the political arena, it's a totally different dynamic.
I'm wondering, as you saw more diversity in, for example, media and political seats, how did that feel, watching that throughout history as more and more people of color and women came into these positions?
It's well, you see the smile immediately comes to my face. I think about, well, just recently here in our 10th congressional district, when Denny momentarily retired, he thought, before running for lieutenant governor with Miss Reeves, an African-American female out of Tacoma, and Beth Dolio, white female here in Olympia, and then, of course, Marilyn Strickland from Tacoma, who won that particular race. I say that to say we had three very qualified, able, outstanding women and a very diverse options to choose from. And I see that happening more and more. And it's not going to go back. It's going to just keep going in that direction. So it gives me more motivation to be involved in encouraging others to vote, and also to contribute monetarily to those candidates, particularly those candidates of color or progressive whites who have a similar view on how things should be as the two of us.
Heck yeah. Let's see, back to my questions. What are some lessons from your life that you feel could be applied to our Olympia community today?
Okay. Well, I think about 20 years ago when I first retired from state government. I thought I came back, and that's another story. But when I retired, the thought was, well, what am I going to do in my retirement? And Marcia and I talked, and because of the impetus of education in my family, I like to say that it wasn't a question of whether or not my brother and I were going to college. Our parents had made that decision for us. It was a matter of where we were going to go. And also, my mother had decided we were not going to go to college in Alabama. We needed to get out of Alabama and expand our horizon and meet people from other parts of the world. And for two people, particularly my mother, who really hadn't had those experiences, to have that kind of vision, I think that says a lot. I say that all to say, then we decided to put together this foundation. And then I remember when Marcia and I were talking about this, and I said to Marcia, I said, well, Marcia, there's so many educational scholarships out there. How are we going to differentiate our scholarship in the marketplace? And her response was, let's not just fund the A plus students or the B plus students. Let's take some chances on students who may be borderline, who may be late bloomers, who may have to work after school, whose mother or father may be in prison, and they're in a very difficult situation. And I'm pleased to say that with the support of a number of businesses and individuals here in Olympia, we've raised and distributed over $500,000. You mentioned the figure earlier, for about 119 students. 110, okay. 110 students up to 4 years, $2,000 a year. But the essence of that is, you don't have to be a Bill Gates. You don't have to be a Warren Buffett. You don't have to be a Jay-Z. You don't have to be an Oprah Winfrey in terms of her wealth. But we can all make a difference if we work together, connect with others who have similar values and commitments to make a difference. So I think that scholarship program is symbolic of things that can happen and are happening in Olympia, but I think it could happen even more so. And then a couple of basics that I was brought up with: the more you give, the more you receive. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And I like to be treated good, okay? And I treat people, I try to, not always, but I do. So I just think there's some fundamental things that we can do which aren't that complex. At the same time, you can have different laws, different legislation, different referendums, different procedures, but you can't legislate one's heart. how do you change or to get to someone to see something that is so obviously not true, but they believe just the opposite? That one is one that I can't quite understand or have any idea of how to get past.
Let's see. I don't know either. My last question is, this book has been selling out over and over again here, and I'm guessing at browsers as well. What is your reaction to the massive reception to this book? People love it.
It's a hell of a book. No. Well, in all seriousness, it is a good book, but I think I can think about at least three things why I think it's has been doing exceedingly well. Timing is everything. And I think given the state of the country, the state of affairs racially, and how things were in the South, there are things that I reference in my book that my mother talked to me about. In fact, I'll be reading one. Well, I guess I won't because we're probably out of time. That she was trying to prepare me for dealing with the police. And one of the things that she said to me was, which is in the book, you have to avoid the police if you can. And if you do interact with them, respect them, because if not, they will kill you and get away with it. And the fourth thing she said was, there's a segment of our society who feel safe if they feel as though the police or the white structure in some instances have their foot on a Black person's neck. And that's when I was like 5 years old. So when I think about the murder of George Floyd, that's what she was talking about then. So I think this book puts some of those things in perspective, in the sense of this is more overt or more visible because of social media. People see more, it's more visible, it spreads quicker. And then I think the other part of the success of the book is that it's plainly written, I think, and it's not rocket science in the sense of formulas and theories and what have you. And then the other piece that I talked to Marsha about when we were done, when I think about Barb Glass and I think about another person, Rita Robinson, who worked with us on the book, two of the people who proofed the book, Sherilyn Casey and Nancy Wicker, and we had an editor out of California, Laura Taylor, family readers, Marsha, the editor-in-chief. This project was worked. It was scrubbed. It was not something that was quickly done just to get it out. So we had a super team working on it. And if I stayed out of the way more, we probably would have been done sooner. But but those are the three reasons that I think the book has been successful. The timing, I think the professionalism of the book, and the people who worked on the book were working on it and gave more than just their technical skills. They gave of their heart.
Well, we're really overjoyed to have this book in our store. It's a labor of love. Let's see. Okay, so it's time for, if anybody has any questions or answers, you are free to either unmute yourself or you can put something in the chat. Usually this is when we wait for about a second before somebody speaks up. Let's see. If not, that is also fine. How about this? You have one more vignette to share with us, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Could you share this other vignette? And then if anybody has any questions, you are free to type them up in the chat box at the bottom.
Okay. And in light of time, I've shortened this vignette already, but I will probably shorten it as we go along just for the sake of time.
Okay.
And this one is entitled Jail Time. What a special night it had been in Bessemer. August evenings could be hot, but that evening there was a breeze with temperatures in the low 80s and the humidity was bearable. As I turned left from North Avenue, also known as the Bessemer Superhighway, to 22nd Street, I noticed a police car traveling in the opposite direction. Nothing to be alarmed about, I thought. I wasn't speeding. I hadn't been drinking. I was merely on my way to pick up my cousin, Ronald Banks. This sense of innocence and calmness soon vanished. In my rearview mirror, I saw the police car quickly spin around with its lights flashing. Within seconds, the police car was almost touching my rear bumper, and the police officer on the passenger side frantically waved me to the side of the road. I was in total shock. What had I done in this nanosecond from the time the police saw me and then whirled around and advised me to stop? The policeman who was driving the car immediately asked me to see my driver's license. As I handed him my license, my question was, "Officer, could you please tell me why you stopped me?" At this point, he just looked at me and walked away to the parole car without saying a word. The other police officer just stood there, looking at me as if I had robbed a bank. I was particularly interested in the placement of his right hand. It wasn't on his gun, but it was pretty close, signaling to me, "Don't try anything, because if need be, I can get it quickly." By now, his partner had returned, and he must have found out that I didn't have any outstanding warrants. For the second time, I asked, "Officer, why did you pull me over?" Finally, he indicated the reason he pulled me over was because as I passed him, I had failed to dim my lights. My first response was disbelief, and I thought, "You mean I'm getting all this grief for supposedly not dimming my lights? I mean, we're not talking about speeding, driving without a license, driving while under the influence, assault, burglary, or carrying a concealed weapon, but failing to dim my lights." Once I got past the shock of why I had been stopped, I informed the police officer, not in a confrontational way, that my lights weren't set on brights or high beam. I suggested they must have been mistaken. I was adamant about this and mentioned that if this was the case during my travel from Birmingham, someone driving on the superhighway would have flashed their lights, alerting me that my lights were on bright. I told them this hadn't happened. Believe it or not, I wasn't intimidated by the police, but I was respectful. On those few occasions when I've been stopped by the police for some minor traffic infraction, I always thought about what my mother told me as a kid. Respect the police, and remember, they can kill you for no reason and get away with it. Knowing my rights according to the law was one thing. The law in Alabama was another. The two white officers were really checking me out. I think they didn't especially like the fact that I was questioning their judgment, not once, but twice. One of the police officers had a flashlight and he started shining a light on me from head to toe. I had a large afro framed by a full black beard. I wore prescription sunglasses and it was about 10 p.m. Rounding out my look was a gold knit short sleeve sweater with brown stripes, gray slacks, and brown sandals, sort of an Eldridge Cleaver look. After being inspected from head to toe, the police officer who was on the passenger side of the car out of nowhere asked me if I was funny. Not ha ha funny as being a jokester, but funny at that time in Alabama meant, are you a sissy, faggot, punk, or did you have sugar in your britches. Without missing a beat, my response to the police officer was, "Are you funny?" As soon as I uttered those words, I thought, Merritt, you must be crazy. So much for all the training you've received from your parents and relative over the years. Get ready for the ass whooping you are about to receive, or maybe worse. Instead, and fortunately for me, the two policemen decided that I needed to be locked up. Once I arrived at the jail and before being placed in a cell, I was allowed to make one phone call. By now, the absurd had become ludicrous, and I thought this surreal experience was indeed funny. And I mean, ha ha funny. I called Ronnie at his girlfriend's home, explaining that I was in jail in downtown Bessemer for failing to dim my lights. Initially, he didn't believe me and thought I was playing a joke on him. After I convinced him that it was no joke, he started laughing and cracking up, which meant I started laughing and cracking up. However, the arresting officer didn't appreciate my sense of humor. They pulled the telephone from my hand and ended my call. Because of my bad attitude, I wasn't locked up in a regular cell, but the cell at the jail known as the Hole. This cell had a small opening at the bottom of the door, just large enough for a food tray to be slipped through. The cell was in total darkness. The walls had it. Here I was, Mr. College Boy, Morehouse man, in a padded cell in my hometown of Bessemer, Alabama, for failing to dim my lights, question the authority, maybe being funny. Worst of all, I couldn't stop laughing my head off. Now that I was in the hole, I needed to demonstrate that I was worthy of such esteemed placement in the jail. I started banging on the door and in the loudest voice I could render, demanded my release of being falsely arrested in jail. When was the last time you heard of someone being arrested for failing to dim their lights? I continued my ruckus for another 30 minutes or so to no avail. I finally settled in for the night. The next thing I knew, it was morning, and a tray of pancakes and sausage magically appeared through the opening at the bottom of the cell door. Actually, they didn't look too bad. But of course, I pushed them away, just like on television and on the movies. Fortunately, a little after 8 a.m., Ronnie arrived and bailed me out of jail. As I was getting my watch, wallet, and other personal items, I heard a couple of the inmates talking about that youngster who was in the hole last night. One said to the other, "I'm not sure what he's in here for, but he's a real hellraiser." Oh boy.
I love your writing and storytelling. It is so rich and good. So two questions have come in. Tess B asks, will this book be available in audiobook form? Because I think because your reading is just so engaging. Are you possibly doing this on an audiobook?
Yes. Let's see. I'm going to ask Marcia to come over here for a moment and bring you up to date on a couple of platforms that she's working on. No, go.
Okay. All right.
Hi, Marcia.
Hi. Yeah, we've had a number of requests for an audiobook, and that's going to be our next project. Right now, we almost have the paperback and ebook form going on to Ingram Spark. So that's kind of been our current process, so that all bookstores and actually I think individuals can order from Ingram Spark. So yeah, our plan is to have Merritt read and do an audiobook. Thank you for that encouragement.
One other question by Alice is, will there be signed copies at Orca Books?
Yes.
And I think,
Yes. I'm thinking, do you guys need some more books?
we will probably need a couple more books, but I'm looking at all the copies that you give us, and they are technically signed. They have a lot of writing in them, actually, but I suppose
They're signed. They're signed, and actually, I make a generic signing of the book, and then the only thing that's needed is to put the person's name there. So I just try to get creative and to convey a message of whatever is top of my mind about the book or whatever else I might be thinking about.
Yeah, actually, Jonah, they are all signed with his name. Do you see it? It's kind of in the middle of the page.
I see it.
Okay,
Yeah, they're
yeah.
all signed.
Yeah, he has quite a long message. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yes, Alice, to answer your question, they are all signed. So don't worry. All right. Any closing remarks by anyone? This has been a really great hour. I've been having a lot of fun. All right.
Well, Marcia and I want to thank you, Jonah, and Orca Books for supporting us on the book and having us tonight. And I would like to, and I think you are interested as well, when things improve, we can do something on site and discussions and sign books directly for folks. Hopefully, maybe in the early fall.
That would be great. Oh my gosh, we will be definitely in touch. All right. Merritt, Marcia, everyone, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight.
Thank you. Good night.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go.